And happy Saturday night, everybody. Thanks for coming. Hi, Steve Wolfbrand, Cheyenne Tierra. Hi, honey. That's Bonnie, of course. Hi, Barbara Reed. And Kay. Hi, Kay. Dale Weaver. How are you, Dale? And there are a few other people here as well, whose names I haven't seen yet. But hi to everybody. Well, I started out thinking that my topic for tonight would be reasons not to go to war with Iran. But then, as I thought about it, I realized we put ourselves in a state of war with Iran when our president gave the order to assassinate General Soleimani. General Soleimani was a state actor, not a non state actor. He was a general and a very high level person in the Iranian government. There's some dispute over whether he was number two or number three in the government, okay, of Iran, but he was extremely high level. It was as if a foreign power was to drone our Secretary of State when they were on a diplomatic mission to another nation. That's what Mr. Trump has done. James Risen, okay, in an article for The Intercept that I linked to, stated very flatly he stated absolutely directly that Donald Trump has murdered Qasem Soleimani. He did not mince words, in other words. James Risen calls Soleimani the Iranian viceroy in Iraq. That was certainly a metaphor. It was not the title. But what he's saying is that Soleimani had that function, was performing that function, a viceroy's function, but for the government of Iran in Iraq. Okay, so I agree with Risen. I think that this was flat out a murder, and that Trump has fulfilled his threat that he openly made, but during the campaign, that he could murder someone and he could get away with it. And now he murdered a high level person in the Iranian government, and he expects to get away with it. And he has involved the rest of us in his murder of General Soleimani. And what has that done to the United States? Well, most immediately, and the first reason to end the war with Iran, which was started by this murder, which put us in a state of war. The first reason is because our troops in Iraq, which, by the way, the Parliament of Iraq has asked us to pull out and end our involvement in Iraq. What this murder has done in putting us in a state of war with Iraq is that it has opened up the danger that the militia groups inside of Iraq, which are backed by Iran, are now saying things like, and this is a quote from an article which originally appeared in Informed Comment and was written by Juan Cole on January 9th, 2020. And what this article is about is the threat that the Shia militias now pose for the U.S. military in Iraq. The movement of Harakat Hezbollah al-Nujaba, the movement of the nobles of the Party of God, had its official spokesman, whose name is Nasser el-Shamari, warn American soldiers in Iraq, saying, quote, "Do not close your eyes, for the revenge of the martyr Abu Mahdi al-Muhandis is inevitably coming at the hands of the Iraqis until the last American soldier is expelled." Now, of course, we have refused to withdraw our troops. In other words, when the Parliament requested that we did, the administration said, no, we're going to stay on, okay, because Iraq needs us to stay on to fight ISIS in Iraq. We keep saying that the vote of the Parliament was an advisory vote. But it was a vote of the legal Parliament of Iraq. And the Parliament asked the Prime Minister to implement it in the executive branch of that government. Now, Trump and our Secretary of Defense, Esper, insist that U.S. troops won't be withdrawn from Iraq because the Iraqi people want them there. That's ridiculous. We have no way of knowing that, but all the indications are that they do not want us there because they don't want Iraq to become a battlefield over which the U.S. armed forces and the Iranian-backed armed forces will fight. Juan Cole points out that the fact is that if the Iraqi government wants our U.S. troops out, they will have to leave or face legal liabilities for any deaths they cause. They could even be prosecuted in U.S. courts in the absence of a status of forces agreement, which they no longer have, since the parliament has basically abrogated that. Also, the head of the League of the Righteous, but someone by the name of Qais El Khazali, okay, and the League of the Righteous is a radical Shiite militia in Iraq that forms part of the Popular Mobilization Forces, called Wednesday for Iraq militia attacks on U.S. troops in Iraq to match those of Iran in revenge of the murder of Abu Mahdi al-Muhandis, the deputy commander of the PMF, who was in the company of General Soleimani. When they both were attacked by the U.S. drones on their way to a diplomatic meeting with the government of Iraq. The Iraqi parliament in early 2018 recognized the Popular Mobilization Forces as part of the Iraqi military, and its line of command goes up to the prime minister himself. We, on the other hand, branded the League of the Righteous as a terrorist group and made al-Khazali a designated global terrorist, quote unquote. Now, that, of course, may be an official status here in the United States, but it has no international recognition whatsoever. In response to a tweet by al-Khazali, two Katyusha rockets hit the Green Zone, where the U.S. Embassy is located, late on Wednesday. The rockets were supposedly fired by a coalition of by Shiite militias, including the League of the Righteous and the Kata'ib Hezbollah, the Brigades of the Party of God. The head of the Kata'ib Hezbollah had been al-Muhandis, who, of course, was just assassinated by Trump, along with Soleimani. So that's where we are. We, meaning our troops in Iraq, now have to be careful of the Iraqi Shiites themselves, because the Shiites will be looking to revenge themselves not only for the murder of their dear guest, Qasem Soleimani, quote unquote, from Cole, but also their own countryman, Abu Mahdi al-Muhandis. And so the advice, quote, don't close your eyes, American troops in Iraq. So now our troops in Iraq are opposed to the Shiites, are exposed to the Shiites of Iraq, which they were not before Trump's attack. His attack, his state of war, has created that exposure. So the safety of our troops is one reason why we might want to end the war with Iraq. But second, third, and fourth reasons for ending the war in Iraq are given by Anthony DiMaggio in his article that appeared in Counterpunch on January 8th of 2020. And he gives three reasons for ending the war with Iraq. The first reason is that there's no agreement in the United States about an Iranian threat. But to the United States. Now, Trump and some of his people in the government, of course, claimed there was a threat. That strike, was imminent. Of course, he had to make such a claim to justify the murder, of Soleimani. If his justification does not hold water, then he's exposed as a war criminal, he's exposed as a murderer, and he's exposed as a violator of the U.S. Constitution. And as a violator of our treaty with the United Nations. But the fact is, within the administration, shortly after Soleimani's association, the Department of Homeland Security declared there was no specific credible threat from Iran within the U.S. borders of the United States. And our U.S. military officials actually disagreed regarding the escalation carried out by Trump. As reported in the New York Times, and as quoted in the article by DiMaggio in Counterpunch, quote, in the chaotic days leading to the death of Major General Qasem Soleimani, Iran's most powerful commander, top American military officials put the option of killing him, which they viewed as the most extreme response to recent Iranian-led violence in Iraq, on the menu they presented to President Trump. They didn't think he would take it. In the wars waged since September 11th, the Pentagon officials have often offered improbable options to presidents to make other possibilities appear more palatable, unquote. The Times also reported that top officials of the Pentagon were stunned by the president's order. Furthermore, the paper reported that, quote, the intelligence supposedly confirming Iranian plans to attack the United States diplomats was thin, quote unquote, over those words, thin. In the words of at least one U.S. military official who was privy to the deliberations of the administration. According to that source, there is no evidence of an imminent attack in the foreseeable future against American targets outside U.S. borders. Outside U.S. borders. Now, this, of course, was probably changed by Trump's attack, and now there is such a threat. But prior to his attack, there was no such threat, according to many people inside of the government. There was no unity of opinion on this. There are many people who think the attack took place in order to distract attention from Trump's impeachment. So, there is no unity inside of the Trump administration over whether we ought to have a war with Iran. There wasn't before the murder, and there is none at this moment in time. But furthermore, there is a great deal of division in the country. This is not like things were in 2001 and 2002, when the AUMF was originally passed. Then the country was unified. Now, when the Bush administration was selling its war in Iraq, the claim that we ought to fight Iraq didn't have the support that our intervention in Afghanistan had. That was supported by the idea that the Taliban was basically joined with Al-Qaeda, and that they were responsible in some way for 9/11. But when the Bush administration sold, the war in Iraq, it sold that war on the basis that somehow Saddam Hussein was involved in 9/11, and besides, he had weapons of mass destruction which were a threat to the United States. And so the Bush administration sold the war on that basis. And even though there was some degree of opposition, the public was far more unified then than it is now in relation to supporting the idea, comparing the idea of supporting a war in Iraq compared to the current notion from the Trump administration that we need to be supporting this state of war with Iran. This is highly controversial with the public, in a way that the Iraq war or the Iraq invasion of 2002 was simply not. So the third reason for ending the war with Iran. Well, the third reason is that a war with Iran at this point would not be a war on but terrorism. The Trump administration is using the notion that the Iranian regime is a terrorist regime, and that Soleimani in particular was a terrorist, and that we need to have a war with them because it's part of the war on terror that we have supposedly been prosecuting since 2001. However, as DiMaggio says, the effort to link the deaths of U.S. soldiers in wartime to terrorism echoes the State Department's 2019 statement, which designated Iran's Quds Force a quote terrorist unquote organization, citing its responsibilities for the deaths of at least 603 American service members in Iraq from quote 2003 to 2011 via its support for the Iraqi militias that were engaging in attacks on U.S. forces then. But also, DiMaggio points out that from the viewpoint of the Iraqis at that time, the U.S. military personnel killed in Iraq were participating in a criminal, illegal occupation which was widely condemned by the international community. From their point of view, the U.S. war in Iraq was a crime of aggression under the Nuremberg Charter, and it violated the UN Charter's prohibition on the use of force, which is only allowed via Security Council authorization, which, as we all know, the United States did not have. It also would be justified in the case of military attacks undertaken in self-defense against an ongoing attack. However, Iraq was not at war with the United States prior to the 2003 invasion. So contrary, and I'm quoting again now from DiMaggio, contrary to Trump's and the State Department's propaganda, there are no grounds to classify the deaths of military personnel in an illegal war as terrorism. Instead, he says, one could argue that domestic Iraqi political actors, of which include the militias, okay, the Iraqi militias, regardless of their ties to Iran, were within their legal rights under international law to engage in acts of self-defense against American troops acting on behalf of a belligerent foreign power, namely the U.S., which was conducting an illegal occupation. So that's the third reason why we should end the war. Because the idea that it's a war against terrorism is simply not a credible idea. It is a war against another state, a war against another power, specifically Iran. And it is a war that proposes to use Iraq as one of the major battlefields, which the Iraqis have no desire to participate in at this point in time, as indicated by the actions of their parliament. So then, the fourth reason for ending the war comes up. The largest takeaway from recent events should be to recognize the tremendous danger that the escalation of war poses to the United States and to the region. Now, we have already done far too much to break the Middle East. The chaos that exists in Afghanistan is one result of our actions. The chaos in Libya is another result of our actions. The chaos in Iraq is another result of our actions. We're in the process of helping the Saudis to break the country, okay, of Yemen and create an anarchy there. And then, of course, there is the mass confusion we have helped to create in Syria through our actions in Syria that gave rise to ISIS. And then, when we intervened in order to stop the rise of ISIS again, we vacillated between supporting ISIS to try to overthrow Assad and working against ISIS, using our air power to support the efforts on the ground of the Kurds and also the Shia-backed supporters of Assad's regime in Syria in order to defeat ISIS. Remember President Obama, who was the biggest cheerleader before the Libyan war, later admitted that the intervention was his worst mistake. Nor was he, in the end, very fond of the Syrian intervention either. It's clear that if we now prosecute a war on Iran, very much of which would be fought by using Iraq as the battlefield, we would create even more deaths, even more chaos, and even more problems for us to solve. As Anthony Damasio says, the only thing worse than a dictatorship is no order at all when societies collapse into civil war, anarchy, and genocide. The story of ISIS's rise is one of citizens suffering under war and instability and becoming increasingly tolerant of extremist political actors, so long as these extremists are able to provide order in times of crisis. So, what is the fifth reason for ending the war with Iraq? The fifth reason is simply, I'm sorry, I should have said, what is the fifth reason to end the war with Iran, which we have started? The fifth reason is that we cannot afford such a war. I am not talking about the financial price of such a war. We can pay the financial price. I'm not talking about the fact that we might pay a horrendous price in U.S. lives lost. What I am talking about is the diversion of U.S. attention and U.S. efforts and U.S. politics to another war in the Middle East when we have a climate emergency to handle back here in the United States and worldwide also. We need to be in collaborationist mode right now. Our very existence depends on it. Prosecuting a war with Iran, therefore, is a threat to our very existence. It is not a threat to our very existence because the Iranians might win. That's not the threat to our existence. The threat comes because we cannot afford a 3-year distraction or a 4-year distraction or a 5-year distraction or a 10-year distraction of putting major, huge resources into a war with Iran, a never-ending war in the Middle East. Oh, with Iran, when we need to be focused on a just transition to a Green New Deal. That, to me, is perhaps the most compelling reason why we need to end this diversionary war with Iran immediately, if not sooner. The easiest way to end it, by the way, would be if the Republicans in the Senate come to their senses and move ahead to immediately impeach and remove Trump from office. And if Pence chooses to pursue this illegal war, to pursue this aggression, then it is necessary for the major parties to impeach and convict him as well for aggression, violations of international law, violations of human rights, violations of the UN Charter, violations of various treaties we have with other nations. This is a criminal war, full of war crimes. And this president should be removed from office for prosecuting it, for beginning it, and for prosecuting it. And once he is removed, if his vice president insists on doing the same thing, he needs to be removed too. And if Nancy Pelosi then somehow ascends to the presidency, she needs to know that she too could be impeached and convicted if she doesn't speedily end this illegal war. So those are my 5 reasons for ending the war fast. So now I want to see what you have to say. And I'll check in with you in just a second. I want to flash my please share, like, and subscribe screen. And especially please share, like, and subscribe when the YouTube video goes up. And please become a patron at www.patreon.com Joe_Firestone. So now, before I go further, what I want to do now is to flash a gift that I received from my daughter for my birthday. If you can read that. What it says is, it's coming into focus now. It says, F.A. Thor. For Thor. And it also says, let me bring it into focus. Well, let me just read it because it's hard to bring that part of it into focus. Anyway, there's a picture of a hammer for the T, of Thor's hammer, and it says, like a dad, just way mightier. See also, handsome, exceptional. So if my daughter Devorah is watching this, I want to publicly thank her for designating me Thor, and for presenting me with a symbolic hammer that I can use where relevant in the political struggles that we all face. So, with that, I want to check out your comments and find out what you think. And thank you for all the likes and other things. And by the way, please share this. And Fern Henley says Sykes-Picot Agreement had deliberately started divide and conquer the Middle East. See Lawrence of Arabia, but British, of course, as always. Yes, see Lawrence of Arabia. Yes, it did. The way the Allies drew the boundaries of the Middle East at the end of the First World War was greatly responsible for the chaos we see there today. We're grappling with all the things that have happened as a result of what the great powers did then, and also as a result of the support which the UK gave to the aspirations to found a Jewish homeland in Palestine. The effort supporting which began before the First World War, but after the First World War, the groundwork was laid for that to happen. Over the years, and the effort, of course, was successful with the founding of Israel, if I recall, in 1947 or 48, I forget the year, okay, at that time. But founded with the strong support of Harry S. Truman, okay, and the United States. But initially, with some support from the Soviet Union too, the Soviet Union actually recognized Israel when it actually declared its independence and the existence, okay, of the Israeli state. Cheyenne says Pence is a horrible alternative to Trump. He is a horrible alternative to Trump. But whether he would be worse than Trump, okay, is another question. He certainly wouldn't be there for very long, and he wouldn't be able to command the support of the elements of the population that currently fanatically support Trump. Fern Henley says, oh no, hit the green zone. General Flynn will be distressed now. A little snark. And Kay says Pence is just as guilty as Rump. Yes, he is. And Evelina Pont says Pence is horrible, period. Lana Dell has joined. Cheyenne Tierra says, meanwhile, Puerto Rico has two huge quakes. Yes. Kay says she's been sharing live reports from Puerto Rico all day again. But Puerto Rico is going to need some more aid. And Nancy Pelosi better get on the stick and legislate that immediately. Send it up to the Senate immediately. Shove it in Trump's face immediately. And Kay says, people need to know what is going on outside of politics. They do. They absolutely do. And Fern says, Evelina, so confusing. I watched George Webb Truth Leaks on YouTube and try to think critically as well as call for deliverance. And Rich Serber has joined us. Hi, Rich. Nice to see you here. And Stephen Wolfrath says, okay, they let me out of FB jail today. I'm going to share to some groups. Thanks, Steve. Much appreciated. And Cheyenne says, yes, but I wasn't alive during the Roman Empire. I guess you're a few years older than me, Steve. And she leaves us a GIF, okay, animated GIF. Unfortunately, I can't see it but too well. But I'm sure you'll enjoy clicking on it. Anyway, Dale Weaver has joined and Alan Scott has joined. And Cheyenne says she agrees. Clinton did the same thing with Iran during his impeachment, reported by the New York Times back then. Yes, but he didn't do too much. Oh, actually, she meant Clinton did the same thing with Iraq. He didn't do quite the same thing. Didn't do quite the same thing. He was still operating under the authorization for the use of military force that was put in place by the Bush 41 administration. So there's a question about the illegality of Clinton's actions in that instance. But there's much evidence to suspect that he was wagging the dog. And Steve said, in my opinion, 9/11 was done by our own government. Well, what's more clear is that the Saudi government must have had something to do with it on some level. Steve says, sorry, I know I'm not supposed to say that out loud. Well, you can say anything out loud here, Steve. Steve, I think so too, if even by neglect, the reports coming out about it being planned. The GOP didn't want to stop it. Well, we certainly know they were warned. They were warned even by the Clinton administration that they had to be very, very careful. And there were other warnings which appeared actually later on that an attack was imminent from Al Qaeda at that time, and the Bush administration just ignored the warnings. Cheyenne said, in my opinion, in cooperation with all the war profiteers. Cheyenne says, I think you probably mean war is peace, right? One of George Orwell's slogans. Global Peace Rallies, Saturday, January 24th. Plenty of time to organize in our communities. Let's do it because the state of war is still there. It's still there. And we have to end it. And Kay says, I feel like I got transported back to the 60s again with anti war protests and all. Wish I could be that young again, too. SMH. And Steve says, I'll never forget the video of George W. searching the Oval Office for WMDs. Some joke. After so many dead. Okay, many of our own. Oh, I think you mean I will not forgive, right, Steve? Ah, yeah, I will never forgive. Sorry. And Case says, I knew what you meant, Steve. And Evelina says, Iran said it would declare the U.S. military a terrorist organization if they refuse to leave. I was under the impression, I may be mistaken about this, but I'm under the impression, okay, that Iran has already declared the Pentagon a terrorist organization. And by the way, I should add here, okay, that if Iran has declared the U.S. military, the Pentagon, as a terrorist organization, then by our logic, they could make perfectly legal attacks on our Secretary of Defense in the same way that we assassinated General Soleimani. I mean, what right did we have to assassinate Soleimani? All that we can claim is that we declared the Quds Force a terrorist organization. And we're saying that gave us the right to assassinate Soleimani because he was a terrorist. By the same token, okay, if Iran says that our Pentagon is a terrorist organization, then by that same logic, they would have the right to attack Secretary of Defense Esper, right? Right? If they were able to get at him. Cheyenne says, same here. My next door neighbor was putting up support our troops signs. I was flipping out. I wouldn't say flip out. What I would say is support our troops. That means get them the hell out of there. End the war. End the war. That's supporting the troops. I have a friend who has gone over there or is about to go over there. He's being called back. He's being called back again. He is now married and has 2 children. He has an adorable family. And he's being called back for active duty. Now, the best thing I can do for him is everything I can do to get him the hell out of there. And Evelina says, the best way to support the troops is to bring them home. And Kay says they never support the troops. Yeah, the person who supported the troops best over a long period of time in our government, you know who that person is. We all know who that person is. That person is Bernie effing Sanders. That person is Bernie Sanders. He has been the person most persistently supporting the vets when they get home. He has been the person who has been fighting for him. And Evelina says their ambassador at the UN said that. Cheyenne said the best way to support troops is to bring them home. Kay said never support the troops. And Steve said, I'm afraid removal from office ain't going to happen. Our best bet is to elect Bernie Sanders. Calling for his removal from office is not mutually exclusive with electing Bernie Sanders. Steve, we can do both. We need to try our best to remove him from office so that the war can immediately end, or nearly immediately end. That's the quickest way to do it. And we ought to be at the Republicans every goddamn day from now until the election about impeaching the guy and getting him out of office. Lana comments, what about the war before the war, like sanctions? I don't know that a state of war with Iran actually existed due to the warlike sanctions. That case can probably be made at the International Court of Justice that we've created a state of war with them long ago because the sanctions that we have pursued against them were actually in violation of the agreement that we negotiated and concluded with them in 2015. I mean, we signed a treaty with them, and before Trump actually pulled us out, whatever sanctions we were pursuing at that time were illegal sanctions under international law because we had agreed under that treaty not to have sanctions anymore. Anyway, Dolores Pierce has joined again, and Lana Dell says, nice shirt. And Cheyenne says to Evelina, you're telling me. And Steve says, sweet gift. She obviously loves you. Well, I should hope so. Okay, Evelina says, cool t-shirt. Cheyenne says, shared. Kay says, I always share as soon as you pop up. Steve says, I'm sharing, Doc. They released me from FB jail. Big mistake. Not from my point of view. They should never have put you in the first place. Along the same subject line, the movie Queen of the Desert. Thank you, Lana. Kay says, I'm kind of bummed today. It's the 4th anniversary of my late hubby's death from cancer. I'm sorry, Kay. Miss that old hippie every day. I'm sure you do. And Evelina says, I'm restricted to making comments to groups until the end of the month. They're always putting us down. I think they don't like what we say. Cheyenne says, I've already bought handcuffs to help them take me in. I have mafia friends in FB jail. Steve says, sorry, Kay. Okay, at least you're amongst friends here. And Rick Maynard says, hi, all. Kay says, thank you, Steve. Hi, Rick. Thank you, Steve. Always a hard time for me. And China says, Joe, it still was a distraction strategy by Clinton, Iraq. Yes, it was a distraction strategy. Nothing was going on there that was worth the Clinton effort at that time. Kay said, if we would have had a single payer, my hubby could have been saved. Okay, we could have had single payer. We could have had single payer, okay, if Obama had supported it. I am convinced that he could have passed H.R. 676 in early March of 2009 if he had wanted to. The opposition to him then was not strong enough to have stopped that. I don't want to go through chapter and verse on that. Someday I will take it up again. But I watched that as it was happening. And the person to blame for the failure of single payer in 2009 was definitely Barack Hussein Obama. Rick, report. Trump cited GOP Senate impeachment pressure as a reason to kill Soleimani. Thanks for the leak to the New York Magazine article. I'm sure that's a good possibility. Okay, and Evelina says a state of war is on pause for the moment. Not legally. The state of war was created by the murder, okay, of Soleimani. Last I checked, there was no negotiation ending that state of war by common agreement. We started a war. We murdered a high official of another state. And I'm not speaking metaphorically. That was a murder. According to international law, that was a legal murder. Unless Trump can prove the opposite, which he has not thus far done. Kay says maybe they will hit the White House. Laugh out loud, but take them all out. That's what I was doing, Joe, putting up my own signs. And Rick Maynard says, just like Nam, 'tis not the troops' fault. It's the leaders who send them there. Of course. We all support the troops there. At least the ones who are acting legally. We don't support the others. Giant said, I lost the love of my life in Vietnam. That's when I became a busy peace activist. No one should not assume I don't know what's going on. Cheyenne, I assume that you do know what's going on. Evelina says, Dr. Joe, do you really believe Pence would pull out of the Middle East if the president were to get convicted and removed from office? I'm not certain that he would pull out of the Middle East, okay, but I think if he were impeached and removed, okay, from office for the murder of a high-level official of another state, I think that Pence might very well then actually negotiate an end to the state of war with Iran. He doesn't have to pull out of the Middle East, okay, in order to do that. So no, I don't believe that he would pull out of the Middle East. Okay, but I believe that if sentiment among the public got strong enough to compel the Republicans to impeach him for the illegal actions he just has taken, then I believe that Trump might just not continue to pursue those illegal actions. Because I'm sorry, I should have said, I don't think that Pence would continue to pursue those illegal actions. And the reason why not is because I think that Pence is more timid than Trump, more cautious than Trump, more conservative in temperament, okay, than Trump. Now, I know Pence is an intellectual nut. I mean, okay, I know that. I think that from the point of view of what Pence thinks he knows for sure, he can't hold a candle to Trump when it comes to intellectual sophistication. Maybe I shouldn't be saying Trump is intellectually sophisticated, but in certain ways, in certain ways, he sees reality that Pence doesn't see. And Pence is a religious fanatic. But as a politician, Pence's whole record has been characterized by caution, by moving relatively slowly, and by covering his rear end. And I think that as a caretaker president of the United States for a few months, he would do that. If we impeached Trump, say, by March, I think for the rest of the year, Pence could be counted on to quiet things down. Kay says, I love Michael Moore. And Rick Maynard says that Marianne Williamson, Hollywood's favorite New Age guru, backs Bernie Sanders for president. Bernie Sanders just got a great endorsement. Kay says, I saw that today, Rick. Well, this is the first time I've seen that. I was busy preparing this today, and I didn't see that. Steve says, that's from Lie Last Cycle. Shine says, remember, I'm a draft counselor. If we wait for the draft, it will be too late for our kids to get CO status. You can PM me on by using Messenger. Steve Wolfbrand says, God. Steve says, Doc, off topic, what's your opinion of can aliens, no non-immigrants, ETs? My opinion is I am very open to the idea. I think it's even probable that we have been visited by ETs. But I don't have any concrete evidence. And I say that as someone who has not been closely studying the issue. But just the whole context suggests to me that it's perfectly possible that we've been visited by aliens. What their attitudes would be towards us, I don't know. Cheyenne says, after promoting Hillary, I don't I trust more anymore. His films have been great. No. His films have, but he promoted Hillary, of course, because uh, well, he knew the capacity of Trump, okay, for evil, and of course there was great capacity for Hillary to do evil also. Okay, but again, Hillary is more conservative than Trump, okay, in his approach. I don't think there's any way that Hillary would have killed Soleimani. No way. No way that would have happened. Now, she might have started a war with Iran over something else. That's certainly very possible. And maybe long before this. But maybe not. There are a lot of other issues. And Kay says, if they have any sense, they will avoid that planet. Maybe they've just left us to stew in our own juices. Kay says, he has backed Bernie for decades. The only reason he backed her was because that was the only choice they gave us. Yes, I know. Steve Wolfbrand said that Marion hasn't endorsed anyone this cycle. That video is from 2015. So that's why I didn't see such an announcement earlier today. But I wouldn't be surprised if she does endorse him. I don't see any reason why she wouldn't, unless she has been enamored by Andrew Yang and his basic income. Kay said that Michael Moore was the first one to say the orange idiot might win. I don't know if he was the first one, but he was the first one that I recall whose name is known at doing so. I think there were a number of others who were not very well known who thought that it was possible for Trump to win. John says, I think some of the ETs are wanting to help us. I've seen live sightings myself. Well, Bonnie has had a sighting or two herself. Cheyenne says, I'm a mental health therapist. Hillary has clear symptoms of dementia, worsened since her fall, and the aneurysm that she had in her brain. Yes, I know. Hillary could have been very, very damaging, certainly. We were presented with a very, very bad choice in 2016. No question about that. Okay, that brings me to the end of your comments and questions, okay, and remarks. I'll give you a little time to say some other things if you're so moved. If not, Rick says, Channel hopping did not take time to read from newsfeed. Ah, Kay says, thank you for being here, Joe. I always like these discussions. Thank you for being here too, Kay. I always like it when you're here. Cheyenne says, thanks, Joe, okay, and everyone. Okay, and I want to thank everyone too. These have become very, very good sessions. I think. And we will grow, but whether we grow or not, these sessions will continue to be very, very good. So thank you very much for coming. I'll be back on Monday night unless something really strange happens tomorrow. That pulls me into live streaming. Rick says, trying to share the United Against Corruption event, January 20th in D.C. The announcement is banned from Facebook. So how can we get it shared, Rick? If it's banned from Facebook, why should it be banned from Facebook? That's ridiculous. Steve said, good peeps here, very good vibes. Cheyenne says, good night and good luck. The same here, Cheyenne. Kay says, very true, Steve. Well, folks, I'm going to say good night. I'll see you on Monday night. Thank you very much for coming.